So, where do you get some really good practice problems to study for your exam? Well, in Chemistry 1305, you will find that within your online textbooks, among other sources. So to get there, go to the website, click Textbooks, and click on your class. And the ones we're interested in primarily are these two online books, one from LibraText and one from Sailororg. So let's take the LibraText first. Many of you are using the online textbooks, and so here we go. You will be familiar. It's arranged by chapters. Let's click Chapter 2 by example. So there is everything in Chapter 2, which is called measurements in this text. And as a quick aside, remember the course is arranged, at least in order, according to a separate textbook, the one by Zoomdahl. The information is also in this online textbook. It's just arranged a little differently. But in Chapter 2 of Zoomdahl happened to also cover measurements, so this lines up pretty well. So let's go down on the online text to section 2.5, which is converting units. If you click on it, you'll find your first two really good sources of practice information. The first is, as you scroll through, you will find examples. There. Look at the problem, see if you can work it without looking at the answer, and then if you can't, then look and see how they worked it. Now, once your skill set's up, the idea is they then have what's called exercises, which are basically examples in which they're not worked out. They just give you the answer. So here's an exercise that they ask you a question and they give you an answer. Right. Okay, that's the in-chapter examples and exercise, a really, really good source. The second source using LibraText, let's go back to the main chapter page, Chapter 2 measurements, and let's scroll down, but instead of clicking on section 2.5 this time, we're going to click on a section called 2.E. The E stands for exercises, and oh, by the way, every chapter has a section that's whatever the chapter number is, and an E, and that's where they house the online exercises. So if I now click that, I will get a bunch of additional practice problems for that particular chapter. And the answers, they give you the questions, and then you scroll down and you get the answers, and then they move on to the next section. A really great source, and that's using LibraText. And so with that, let's go to the second really good resource for practice problems. Let's go back to our textbooks online, and this time let's click the one from Sailororg. And I like the way this is arranged a little better. I can see all of the sections, but at any rate, but it is arranged a little bit differently, but let's nevertheless go to converting units. And you may notice that the text is exactly the same as the other. It just looks a little different. Converting units. And see, in this section, we showed some examples of initial replacements, and that starts out. In this section, we showed some examples of how to replace initial units. So, these is the same content. Again, they number them a little different, and they use different text formatting, but just to convince you, it is the same textbooks. 1 yard equal 3 feet, right below the second paragraph, and the same thing here. And indeed, as you move down, they have the same example problems. Only here, they name them example 7, 8, and 9 instead of 2.51, etc. Right. So far, the same. So I recommend if you're using the Sailor.org textbook, you do the same as before. You look down at the example problems. But here's something that's different. They have exercises at the end of each section. They do not have end of chapter practice problems. This book prefers to put the extra problems at the end of each section. So there you, and by the way, these are different questions at the end, what I will call end of section questions. They are different questions from this textbook, which uses end of chapter exercises. So within each chapter, and then in the LibraText, you can go to that section E to get another batch, and then you can go to the Sailororg textbook, and at the end of each section you can get yet another batch of yet different problems. So there's probably more problems available to you than you would care to work, even without going to the World Wide Web and surfing around for them. One final and important reminding comment is that our textbooks and the information, although it's essentially the same, is arranged differently depending on what source you use. These two online textbooks have the same exact writing, I believe, within the text material, but as you've seen, some of the end of chapter, end of section problems differ. They also number things different. This one used 2.5 for the section converting units, and this one did not have a numbering on the index, but it calls it 2.4 inside the online textbook. So the numbering is a little off on each of those, and it's also different, but those are quite a bit different from the way the course is structured. Remember, the course was structured around a textbook called Zoomdoll, and although all of them have the same information, all of them being the two online textbooks and the Zoomdoll, they are arranged and numbered a little bit differently, and you need to be aware of that. As an example, if we go to the Sailororg and we look at chapter 3, we see the topics there. But actually in the Zoomdoll text, a couple of these topics actually wind up covered in Zoomdoll chapter 4. So once you've studied the material in class and you've seen the class notes and you want the practice problem, come back to these online sources and find the appropriate topic.